to my future self or anyone else out there going down this path. When you're feeling stressed, jump on the path less traveled. What's down there, you ask? Well, I can only give you a preview of my own experience. We learn to listen to the clues that life provides to guide us instead of what society believes that we should do or how we should be and the rules that they want us to follow. In today's world, the algorithms on social media and the AI actually helps to guide us. Today on TikTok, a woman told me to not scroll, that she had a message and that it was from my grandmother. And she mentioned a couple different names, and one of them was a grandmother I used to know. She went on to say that I shouldn't worry because she's taking care of my mom. And I believe she is. And so I don't. She also said that there were going to be messages for me. I was going to be seeing a lot of feathers, which I thought was odd. But as I tuned in to a YouTube watching this guy kayak on a large lake, he was watching the swans take off and fly overhead. And then he finds a down feather in the water that had floated by where he was. And after that, he started talking about anxiety. So given this knowledge, I shared my own latest discovery about anxiety based on my own experiences. I believe anxiety is our inner self, God, universe, shaking us because we're not listening to the messages it's sending us. We live too much believing the physical world should guide us, when it's our spiritual world, our spirit, the God inside us that guides us. The language it speaks is the language of believe. Once we surrender and start listening to what some call the craziness in the spiritual world instead of the craziness in the physical, we learn we do not need to try, but believe and show gratitude. The more we see, the more we receive. The more gratitude we give, the more we learn how to live. After she had said that about the feathers, my own video had finished uploading and it took me to my own video. Hers disappeared just as quickly as it arrived. So I don't know what the rest of her message was for me today, but I suppose that was enough. And now that I think about it, the video that I created included feathers as well. See, I've been trying to figure out how to create community. As a recluse, community is something that I'm starting to understand better. I'm understanding why it's important for me and why it's important for others. And what was brought to me earlier today was a short video that caught my attention. Ellen had talked about how she had saved 2 ducks and now she suddenly has 19 of them in their yard. And so I had created a video about that, creating community, how 2 equals 19. In the energy world, we recognize like follows like. Just as Ellen's 2 rescued ducks found safety in their pond, others felt safe joining. And I suppose that's what we need to focus on when we are trying to create a community. We need to think about how the spiritual world guides us and not how we tend to reach out in the physical world, but instead reach inward for the community that we are to receive. Because others are drawn to us like a magnet when they see something in us that resonates in them. And that is how they come on board. That is why they get intrigued. The other thing I had realized earlier today as well, that when we create content, it's really not about talking to the person, about the person. It's really more about creating a video for ourselves to look back on as a piece of our legacy, you could say. So if I wanted to document about my most recent discovery with anxiety, then I would put that out into the social media world, into the universe, and let it capture the attention of those who resonate with that experience as well. It's not so much about reaching out and saying, hey, I see you have a problem here. I can help you with that. That's what the physical world does. And that's where we need to rewire our brain to look at things differently, to understand how the energetic world operates and learn to speak its language, because it does communicate with us. We just don't listen. So let's talk about when we do start listening to this crazy stuff. What happens then? You discover all kinds of things that you didn't know that you knew existed, but you didn't know that it was sitting right there, literally underneath your nose. It's like walking into a magical world, going from the streets of the city and high-rise buildings and congestion and smog out into the woods with the smell of trees and dirt and the sounds of water and birds. The spiritual world is a magical place, and I don't mean that as in unicorns and rainbows, but if that's what you believe, then that's what you will see. We start to learn about humanity and how it is that we came to be. The age-old question, why are we here? How did we get here? And who are we? These are things that you discover down that path. And you start to see everything in a completely different way than you did before. You may see that you did things the best you could based on the information that you had, based on the timeline in which you experienced that situation. You may realize the same thing about others and the timeline that they had and what they had to deal with in that specific situation. And when we start to see ourselves a certain way, we see others in a similar way, and we see them much differently than we did before. Sometimes the ones that just didn't make any sense to us, we can accept that our feelings were right on that, but that the situation happened for a reason. And that individual will have to deal with their own enlightenment. And not everybody comes down this path, but once you're on that path and you start to experience things differently than what you had before, you start to encounter other people who have been down that path, and they have created a new main trail, a well-beaten path, and it leads to a much more beautiful world than the one you left behind. And they say once you go, you can't go back. And I didn't understand what that meant until I tried, until I looked. See, the anxiety, every time that I considered going back, the anxiety would shake me. It would shake me to the core because it was telling me no. That much I knew. That much I knew. I knew going back was not an option. And I didn't know what laid ahead for me. And that's still unfolding. It's still something that I'm discovering, and it's a different world. They say there are many different worlds, and I have noticed that each industry is a world in itself. They have their own set of beliefs, their own rules. Not everybody plays by the same rules. And sometimes we encounter people from other worlds. They cross our path, and we just have to understand that that's the language they speak in their own world, and we continue on in ours. See, we each choose what life we're going to lead when we incarnate. Before we incarnate, everybody has a role in this game called life. We truly are spiritual beings experiencing a human existence as a human being. And the important part of that is the being part. To be or not to be is a decision that each of us makes, whether we will go down that path or not. We learn to focus on what we hear in our mind versus what we hear with our ears. We pay attention to how our body reacts and how it feels inside, more so than how somebody else is feeling or reacting to the situation in their world. It's a different way of being. It's a different existence. And there's even different ways of healing and eating and exercising and anything that you want to do, anything that is your dream of who it is that you are. There are people that can help you live out your dream as you see it. There is no shortage of mentors in the spiritual world like there is in the physical. And after we get to a point where we have learned enough, then it's our turn to also be a mentor and to help other people who start wandering down that path so they can see it's nothing to fear, and leaving the world of fear behind and instead shining a light for others to find their way. It's such a more beautiful way to live this life. Understanding who we are as energy beings and the power that we hold within ourselves to follow our dreams and live the life as a human the way that we agreed to. That's when we'll know that we've done a good job at living our lives. And not everybody takes the path less chosen. But if you have anxiety, that's a clue. That's a clue that you are aware, and a clue that your inner self is shaking you to pay attention. And you have to figure out why it is that you haven't been